Welcome, Cheryl. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
I'm really happy to be here, Zibby. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and you were so nice to have me on your podcast, which was like such a heart to heart. I feel like you really like get people to open up. And anyway, thank you for having me on, and
I
I'm delighted to be doing it.
absolutely. I just love those conversations so much. If you can talk about death, you can talk about anything, right?
Yeah, you might as well start there. I mean, um, death, ha ha ha, as we like laugh. I mean, I guess that's part of grief, right? Is finding the humor and in the saddest of moments. There's always times to bond over the funny and the crazy and the unexpected. So
It's so true. I like to tell people that I didn't have a sense of humor before my wife was dying. And she was sick for 10 years. So time is everything. But at a certain point, things became very funny. Gallows humor, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But people started laughing at my jokes, which I'd never experienced before. And I've retained some of that. That was she died 25 years ago.
aw.
But life is funnier, which is paradoxical, but true.
So yeah, so take me back to when you started writing. Tell me what happened with your wife. Like give me your whole story. Where were you born?
I was born a mile from where I live at the moment,
Okay.
uh, in Oakland, California. However, I lived all over as a kid. My dad was a minister. It's kind of like being in the military. We moved all over the place. That was probably my first grief experience. I didn't realize it till later, losing, because now people keep each other when they move. But then it was just a hard stop.
True. So true.
So, um, so then fast forward, my next grief experience was probably coming out because you end up, people are not happy about it, right? I was happy about it, but other people weren't. So there's a loss in that of kind of feeling accepted. And, uh, but again, I weathered that pretty well because I was so happy to realize who I was. There's a big relief in that. Um, so then when I was about 37, uh, my first wife was diagnosed with um, an extremely virulent cancer that at the time people were dying within 6 months or a year. It's called multiple myeloma. It's a blood cancer. And in her case, she had a broken back, but it had taken a year and a half to diagnose. I like to tell this story just to get the word out. She was Black, and none of the doctors she went to, which were many, would x-ray her
Why?
because a doctor later admitted that when a Black person shows up with back pain, they assume that that person is malingering, which means making it up to get out of work.
What?
Uh, and we would have thought so, but then this doctor apologized and confirmed it. So when people talk about the differential in healthcare, that's an example.
Wow.
And that one doctor who eventually said, "Oh, I'll give her an X-ray, whatever," and he X-rayed her back, and it was broken from this illness. So that's a parenthesis, but it's an important story to me, just because of the lack of knowledge about what it means to be uh, treated unfairly by healthcare. It's such an extreme example, isn't it?
It's horrific.
Anyway,
I cannot even believe it. It's just horrific. But and the
yeah,
pain
it
that
was
the pain that she must have been in at the time.
a lot of pain. She was a very physically stoic person. She could handle a lot, but by the time it got diagnosed, she couldn't work.
Oh,
She was really disabled. So anyway, then she lived for 8.5 years beyond her diagnosis, which was supposed to be 6 months to a year. And at that same time, I was studying to be a therapist. And so the two are kind of inseparable. I've always called myself a grief counselor because the intersection of that experience with becoming a therapist, it can't be separated. So then years and years of spending time in my office with one or two people. Um, and I just started feeling like I wanted to do something bigger in the world. That's a big thing, actually, being with one or two people and helping them navigate to whatever their future is going to be. But I started feeling a little hemmed in, you know. And then I thought, well, what should I do? I should write a book. Now, I'm a very erratic writer,
And this
could I
is
just say.
was this after your wife had passed away or
Oh,
during?
yeah, years and years after,
Okay.
for sure. I started having that thought, you know, 2 years afterwards, I met my second wife. That compelled me. I was raising kids. So it was a long, I like to say, it can be really long, this thing of making something out of your grief. you know,
Yeah, no rush.
no rush. And I
Oh, wait, all of a sudden I can't hear you.
was
Oh,
different.
oh, there we go. Sorry, I lost your sound for a sec. Okay, keep going. All good now.
I'm gonna have to take my earbuds out because they quit.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, good. Um, anyway, so I started playing around with writing a book. I'm an erratic writer, which means sometimes I write a lot and sometimes I write nothing. I'm not very disciplined. And it's usually something really hits me and I've got to get it out. But mostly I sing actually to deal with grief.
Wow.
That's my so
Is this like singing in the shower, or you belong to a singing group, or what type of
I,
singing?
I belong to a singing group, the Oakland Interfaith Gospel Choir. But in the year following my wife's death, I sang every day by myself in my house. And I had like 3 or 4 songs I sang every single day. And then others would come in and out. But I had to do it. I had to do it. Have you noticed in grief, whatever it is that you do to try to get through that, it becomes like you must?
Yes.
Uh, I'm sure you've heard that from other guests and maybe your own experience. So that was one of my I musts in that year, not writing. Maybe I dabbled a little. So then I started thinking, okay, the way that people put their message out in the world is they write a book. But honestly, Zibby, I tried for 2 years to write this informed grief uh, help book, and it just did not work. I was already doing the radio show, and I thought, well, I'll just talk about all my guests. It didn't. It just
Didn't
came
work.
to nothing.
That's all right, as many books do.
So then, at some moment, I had the thought, what if I just created characters that carried my message forward? I had never been one of those people who always thought they'd write a novel, or I'd written a little fiction. And I was thinking about this today before we came on. Probably the heart of the fiction I'd written was wanting to understand something that I found very disturbing. Like the first short story I ever wrote that I can recall was about an abusive mother. I just had no way to understand that. And so I wrote a story to try to understand it. Right? So this this idea of characters, once I had that thought, and I tend to work from the gut up, like I'll have a feeling and then my mind starts to click in after that. So once I had that thought, well, maybe I want to write a fiction story that captures the ideas I'm trying to talk about. And once I had that thought, people started populating the story. And I never thought it was true what people say about novel writing, like your characters live in your head. I thought, they're making that up, or but it was very true for me
Hmm.
that the characters in the book became very real to me, to the point where people say, "Oh, that must be your story," but it isn't. It's just that I know those people. you know, I know who they are. I know why they did what they did, and so that was a really interesting process, actually, to be interacting with these people who were basically made up. Um, but the idea, what my gear is, and you probably know this from being on my show, is that our losses are terrible and grievous, and then we grow if we choose to take those steps through instead of around or over. Then something comes out that's very transformational. And I chose a rather extreme example, or it chose me, I don't know, which is that the two main characters are a mother and daughter who have been estranged for 10 years. And the reason is because the daughter is a lesbian. And that is only partly a made up story. It's not my story, but it is many, many people's story, that they've been deeply rejected by the people that ought to support them no matter what. You're a mom. I mean, I'm a mom. Um, I would support my kids no matter what, but that is not always the case. So the book became about how the mother transforms as a result of the daughter's cancer. And I chose cancer partly, or it chose me, because I know that world,
Mhm.
and because I've seen so many transformations in those times when something wakes you up to the fact that you don't have time to be mean. you know, you don't have time to kind of not do the work to repair things. And so that's what the book's about, the repair that they undergo. And I've witnessed that process so many times as a therapist.
Well,
Uh,
in the book, it was super I sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if I did.
that's okay.
No, I was just gonna say, the whole thing was so heartbreaking, both from the point of view of the mom and Chloe, who reflects back on how they were so attached for so long, right? The oldest daughter, like the firstborn, and how she was just completely cut out. I mean, it wasn't like, "I'm not gonna talk to you as often." I mean, this is like a what's the word from, like, the feudal times when people were, like, discon what completely, ugh,
Communicated.
yeah, right? That's what I was thinking, excommunicated, that's literally what I was about to say, and I was like, "Why am I even saying this word?" But yes, um, and how she would even go about saying how the mom would go about saying she only had 3 kids instead of 4 kids. I mean, that is, like, a real, inability to process some news. This is not
Well, and honestly, I've known so many people. Of course, this was so relevant during the height of the AIDS crisis. So many people whose families said, "You're dead to me," literally. And some people came back around, and some people did not. And so the family that Chloe's built, the community she's built, is really a family, and that is also very common
Mhm.
in the experience of me and many people, that your family is really your chosen family more than your birth family. In my particular family, my parents, after a short period of adjustment, were completely on board with me, which I feel very lucky about. And they did a lot of work to try to change uh, the environments they were in around these issues. But most people I knew, not the case. And so it was a big, long distance for Sal to come.
Um, One of my editors got to the end of the book and said, communicated to me, I hate Sal. She didn't deserve forgiveness. And I was like, wait, you missed the point. Because we have to be redeemed by our changes, don't we? That's the only way growth matters is if we actually change and grow and we're able to do better. So I love Sal. I don't know how you feel about her, but
I feel like Sal had some interpersonal issues, like all her
oh, sure.
relationships were flawed, her sister, I mean, the people who have really big issues with all the people closest to them. That's like a red flag on what is going on with that person. Why? Like, why are they pushing everybody away? Like, what's going on deep down? Although I did find it sort of redemptive in how she was open to counseling. And now that with your own
Complete
counseling,
desperation, right?
yeah. Well, still,
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't have to go that way.
Yeah.
Counseling via the barista station or whatever, but um that was good. I mean, there were slowly changes and but it's hard to forgive when someone's hurt someone else so much. I mean, it's great that she could come around, but I see what your editor means. I mean, the pain that she caused Chloe and then for her to go on and get sick and not have a mom and like I mean that is a lot to put on someone by choice, really. I mean, it's not like she
Yes, yes, and I feel as if maybe this is a piece of it that having I came out at 17. I'm 67. I have a long history with being in part of that community. And um, we either get bitter or we learn to forgive. That's the truth. That Chloe had done her work, right? She had forgiven her mom before her mom came back because that saying, a lack of forgiveness is taking poison and hoping the other person dies. you know, it just eventually you can't carry it around. And I mean, I could give you so many examples where I've been the one to say, someone's acting homophobic and everyone else, all the heterosexual people around me are freaking out. And I'm saying, you got to give them time. People grow at their own pace. Just keep showing up. Say your opinion, but don't judge.
Mhm.
They're attached to what they think for reasons. And obviously this last period of years has been very challenging in that regard because so much harm has been done. And so carrying that viewpoint, sometimes there are moments when I don't say that at all. Like we get to be angry,
Mhm.
but in the end, I hope it brings about change, not just you're off the list of humanity forever.
So when you do your shows and when you work with patients, do you still work with patients, by the way?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
a lot. It's pandemic. Therapy is very busy. Yes.
How do you maintain your own sort of sense of equilibrium when all that emotion is coming at you? Like sometimes I feel at the end of the day, if I've had like even like 3 or 4 back to back really emotional podcasts, like by the time I like open the door again, I'm like, ooh, like I have to regroup here. Like I have to now like go back to the other roles of my life. Like how do you do that switch?
Oh, that's such a big and good question. um, so I had the idea to be a therapist a long time before I became a therapist. And the reason was that I knew instinctively I didn't have a good enough boundary. Like people's stories, people's struggles were just going to sit with me and take me down. So I did a lot of therapy myself because that was an issue in my life, not just in the possible future where I was a therapist. So that was number one. Number two, while my wife was sick, we did a lot of work with how to sit with difficult emotional states. And what that led to is I'm really, really good at letting a feeling come in, register it, and letting it go. It's just a flow for me. And that's practice. That's practice. That being said, I have to do stuff that keeps me emptied out. And that's been a little hard in pandemic because some of the things that I used to do that, for instance, I haven't been in a room singing with other people for a year and a half, almost. No, a year ago, the beginning of March. We've continued to rehearse, but I can't hear anyone else except the conductor. And we've continued to create music, but in little boxes, right? Each of us singing to ourselves, basically. So that was one thing. Second thing, every year I went to a workshop with a man named Francis Weller, um, fantastic grief worker. And it was just an emptying out. So every year I had that emptying out. Um, I would meet with friends to talk about what we were going through. You know, all these ways got interrupted. And so I kind of had to do it for myself. Um, okay, are things getting to be too much? I guess I need to um, go sit in a park somewhere, or, you know, I had to come up with new ways. But what is true is I know when I'm getting overloaded. I don't know how you do what you do, Zibby, because I mean, I read a book a week almost for my show because almost everyone has written a book. And sometimes that's a lot, right? So this thing where you have numerous interviews a day, that, but then on the other hand, I have numerous clients a day.
Mhm.
They didn't all write books and I didn't have to read them all.
That's
That's a
why
little bit.
I try to mix in some picture books and, you know, cookbooks and, like, I need to mix
Yeah.
it up. I can't have a
No, I relate to that because sometimes I'll say I really need a filmmaker this week. You
Right?
know, I
Yeah,
really need a
exactly.
poet this week.
Yeah,
I'll
poet.
try to,
Poetry's great.
right? Because people do all different things out
Yeah,
of their grief experiences, not just write books, although that is a very, very common thing that people do. So, a lot of book reading,
yes,
in all in grief.
yes.
Uh, your reading is more various, I suppose.
It is. Although I actually just started Moms Don't Have Time to Grieve, so I should put you in touch with, Sherry, who Sherry Puzzi is running that, and, we have, like, a column which you should write for, and Moms Don't Have Time
Oh,
to
that would be
Write, and
fantastic. I'd love
Instagram
to.
account, and she's starting to do Instagram Lives, which all just makes me very happy, but, she's had a lot of grief in her life, as many of us have, and, she's doing a really great job, so I'm gonna put you guys in touch for
That would be fantastic. Yeah, I mean, this is this time is strangely ready-made for people who are already in the grief world
Mhm. Yes.
because now a huge number more people, many more people are listening.
Mhm.
Many more people are saying, "Whoa, yeah, grief happens, and you know, how do we get through it, and how do we stay well in this kind of circumstance?" So I'm not happy it happened, but I hope that I don't want to go back to normal.
Mhm.
I want to go back to better,
Yes, that's a beautiful way to put it.
especially in that area of how we stay humane with each other
Mhm.
around our challenges and how we love each other through it, and you know, all of those connective tissues. Um, we do have that possibility at the moment, don't you think,
I
to
totally agree.
improve in that area, which of course is what my book's about too.
Yes.
How do we connect, um, despite our differences?
So, do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
Well, my advice might be weird, but I went to a book reading once. A quite well-known author in the lesbian world was reading, and then there was a discussion. There were three authors. I knew her work the best of the three. And someone said, "What's your writing process?" And all three of them said, "I don't have one." No, I don't write every morning. No, I don't. They were very unstructured. And that was very relieving to me because the way this particular book got written was that it swam around in my head for a really long time and then it suddenly spilled on the page. And like I had to keep writing. And it was a very few number of weeks that got obviously the edits took forever and years and whatever, but the actual original book really fast once it was ready inside of me. So
Mhm.
that's my writing process. And it's the same. I've done a lot of blog posts and that sort of thing. It's the same with that. Something hits me and it swims around for a little while and then it just must be said. I don't recommend that necessarily as the best way to write, but it's just the way I am as a person. The most structured thing I do is show up at discrete times for my clients. Everything else is a little circular for me.
But that's okay. That works for you.
Most of the time it does.
Most of the time.
But I think the thing is feel compelled by what you want to say. I really felt compelled by somehow expressing this idea in a way that people could take in. And narrative story for me is the way. That's what my radio show's about. Um, we all have our own way, but the idea that there is a way, it's really compelling to me.
So Cheryl, if people want to listen to your show, your pod, all the stuff, where do they find you?
So the first thing to do is just put Voice America, all one word, comma, Cheryl Jones or Good Grief in a search bar. There is an actual URL, but it's easier to find it that way. People can remember that. Just Good Grief Voice America will
Perfect.
get them there. My website, which is another way, is www.weatheringgrief.com. And it's both words are complete, not just one G, two G's, weathering grief, like in weathering a storm.
Got it.
Those are the best ways to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story. I'm sorry about your loss in the past and having to go through that illness. But like you said, more growth, and we wouldn't be here, I guess, if that hadn't happened. Anyway.
I wouldn't have you at all.
Yeah. All
Thanks
right.
so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. Bye bye.
Bye bye.